guys, welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. Back at it with another video. Wanted to make a video to talk a little bit more in depth about some of the transits that are going on kind of mid this week. So we've got some stuff going on with Mars and Saturn I want to touch on, which is really significant. And I also want to talk to you guys a little bit about Venus's ingress into the sign of Libra. Last video that I did for Astro Weather, it was really mostly about October, and I want to touch on some of the stuff that's going on now. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I'm a Western astrologer with an emphasis on clairvoyant and tarot readings and integrating the Sabian symbols into my work. And yeah, we're always putting videos out on the channel. If you're new, give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment below, let me know where you're tuning in from and how you're feeling with these energies. Kind of weird. It's like another night of like me making videos at night, which is kind of weird. I don't usually do that. Like I'm kind of better first thing in the morning, but these air trines have been so significant. It's like wild. And being a Libra rising, I have noticed like with Mars in Gemini and Saturn in Aquarius, I don't sit still and I'm getting things done really early in the day. So I don't have a lot of my free time until the evening. But I've noticed this like a different type of content that's coming out when I make stuff at night. So maybe it's Mercury retrograde or my ascendant. I don't know. Okay, so let me pull out my handy dandy highlighter. Let me grab this. There we go. So I can talk to you guys a little bit about what is going on. I would have it up earlier, but you know, if I have it there, it doesn't let me move the chart. So I want to talk to you guys first with what is going on with the Mars and Gemini trine Saturn in Aquarius. Okay, so we've got Mars here. Currently, as of this evening on the 26th, it's sitting at 18 degrees and change of Gemini. Now, this is very important, guys, because Mars is actually getting ready to activate an eclipse that we had, I believe it was last year. I'm going to pull the date so we can take a look at it in a second. Now we know that Mars is in his shadow because Mars will actually be going retrograde right around the end of October and will be retrograding back to about 8 degrees of Gemini. So it's already in the territory that it is going to retrograde back through. I mean, once again, the astrology is just kind of perfect. We've got a trine to the moon in Libra right now. It's also making a trine to Saturn retrograde in Aquarius. So there is a grand air trine. I don't know if you guys noticed this. Just, what is today, Monday? Super busy, very social, lots of talking, kind of bouncing around, getting things done. But also like really awesome to just let things flow. I have found that going with the flow all day was kind of the way to go. And you know, when we see what we would consider malefic planets, you know, I don't like calling planets malefic. That's kind of like old school, but, you know, Saturn, Mars, Pluto. I mean, these are kind of like the heavier hitting planets. When they're all in harmony and they're forming these trines to one another, we see them bring out the best in each other. So while Mars can be like aggressive, agitated, kind of, especially in Gemini, kind of like all over the place, very scattered, when it's in harmony with Saturn, it's kind of aligning and it's got structure and there's focus and there's like really great planning, and things just kind of come together in a very harmonious fashion. So I'm really kind of digging this. Throughout the transits in Libra season, we will see like the Sun come into trines with Saturn. We're also going to see Venus that's going to come into trine with Mars as well as Saturn. And there will be a several-day period where the Sun and Venus towards the end of October are going to follow very closely with each other. So I've said for some time, you know, the first 2 weeks of October is really, really great astrology. We're coming out of a Mercury retrograde. Several planets are going to station direct. And then at the end of the month, we go kaboom with a solar eclipse in Scorpio. So really wonderful, communicative, partnering, right? We think of like Saturn in Aquarius is like separating, but Saturn is retrograde right now. So there's a sense where, especially over the next couple of weeks, because Saturn is going to station at 18 degrees, Saturn is going to start, you know, getting ready to go direct and end its retrograde. So there's going to be a lot of strength when Saturn is sitting at 18 degrees. Also trining this 18, 19 degree point where we had an eclipse that was in Gemini. So when we blend these two energies together, where Saturn says focus, you know, stay on time, stay on task, in the sign of Aquarius, it's like when it comes to your goals, when it comes to happiness among groups of people, networking, the future, but collective groups. And as it's making positive aspects to Mars, it's almost like Mars is taking orders from Saturn and saying, what is it that you want? Let me get, this in order, or let me, focus on that. It's very busy in the sign of Gemini because it's a mercurial sign. So there's lots of phone calls, going places, talking to people, writing things down. I have noticed that ideas have been coming so much more clearly, which is kind of ironic, right? Mercury retrograde. But I'm digging this Mercury retrograde. I feel like it's been really awesome now that Mercury is dropping back into the sign of Virgo and its exaltation. Not much longer, a little less than a week, and Mercury is going to station. And Mercury is also very strong right now because it's experiencing its second trine to Pluto. So in many ways, having watched when Mercury was in Libra's sign and when Venus was in Mercury's sign, that mutual reception was like a lot of what do we need to fix? What are we changing our mind on? What are we going back on? What are we changing or transforming in some way? Or what's not actually perfect? I mean, Virgo can have a tendency to focus on perfection. And so now we're realizing that whatever has been kind of messy since, the end of August when we had the Mercury retrograde shadow, now it's kind of getting worked out. In a couple days' time, on the 29th, we're going to see that Venus is going to move into the sign of Libra. So that'll be interesting because Libra is going to be Venus's home sign. Mercury is the exaltation in Virgo. We're going to have quite a few planets that are quite comfortable in their ruling signs. Still going to feel the Mercury retrograde shadow clear into about mid-October, but that's fine. Really, the only thing that I think is going to be rather intense is going to be our next lunation when we have a full moon. That's going to be in Aries, so I'm going to start working on that video pretty soon. But for right now, I guess really what I'm getting at, all this air element, I have no air in my chart, so usually I'm just very direct and to the point. In this air trine, it's important to be paying attention to what you're working on, what you're putting focus and energy into. What are you building? What are you writing? What are you talking about? Where are you going? What are your plans? Especially if you have a really strong Mars signature. So if you're a Scorpio or an Aries, or if you have a Scorpio or an Aries rising, if you have any personal planets also that are anywhere between 17 and let's say 20 degrees of Gemini, it's really important because Mars is going to retrograde back over this. Now, there's a lot of forward motion right now, even in spite of the retrograde Mars shadow. And this is a sweet little slice of time right before Mars starts coming into a square with Neptune, where things are going to be a little cloudy. We're going to have some lower energy levels. There's going to be some confusion to some extent until we get Mercury direct and out of this opposition with Neptune, because even when Mercury stations on the 2nd, it's still going to be in opposition to Neptune, so there's still some haziness. This is really wonderful working time the next couple days. So we're going to see Mars that's going to be in harmonious trines to Saturn in Aquarius, and that's pretty much going to be now September the 27th through September the 27th through September 30th. So about 3 days, okay? Tongue-tied here, sorry. I've got a lot of notes I'm looking at. So yeah, September 27th through September 30th, Mars trine Saturn is where are we laying the foundation for our drive, our desires, our purpose, what are we working hard on? So you got to take a look at where Gemini is in your chart. Mars is going to be there clear into the new year. It'll be February, I think maybe even going into March, that Mars is going to be in Gemini. And this is important primarily because it's activating that eclipse. So let me give you the dates, because Mars will retrograde back to this same degree in Gemini, and that'll be right around November 30th through December 3rd. Now at that point in time, Mars will be retrograding back, right? So it's going to come back to this 18, 19 degrees. I'll show you the chart in a second, but just know that it's still going to be in a trine with Saturn, but by then Saturn is going to be direct and Mars is going to be retrograde. So it's right now, Mars is saying, I'm chugging along in this area of life, right? This is where I'm going. I'm picking up speed and momentum. And Saturn is retrograde, so he is not as visible. We can't see the effects as physical, like out in the world. It's more internal. So when Mars is retrograding and we lose momentum and steam, and this will be at the end of November to early December, then Saturn is direct, and Saturn is going to be saying, okay, let me help you re-navigate. Let's rework something. Let's go back to the drawing board. You know, look for help from friends. Return to reflecting on your goals, right? And Saturn is really going to be governing some things. So it's interesting right now because Saturn doesn't have quite the power. And then finally, during the third hit, where we're going to see Mars come back to these degrees, we are going to see Saturn in later degrees, but both planets will be direct, and that's going to be from February 25th through March 3rd of 2023. So pay attention to what's going on right now. Let me show you guys these eclipses so you know what I'm talking about, because it's a part of a storyline that's been going on for some time. If you guys already saw my Mars and Gemini video, you know what I'm talking about, where I brought up all of the eclipses in Gemini, and then I also brought up, let's see, let's pull up the eclipses. And I also brought up the Venus retrograde and the Mercury retrogrades. We've had a lot of energy in the sign of Gemini for some time. So this is the eclipse I'm looking at, okay? So it was June 10th, 2021. So I'll let you guys think back to what was going on then. Just make a mental note, kind of, you know, write down. Very important time, okay? Because eclipses play out over a long period. If they get re-triggered by another lunation that is going to oppose or square it, you're going to feel it. If there is a retrograde over that point, you're going to feel it. If there is, yeah, like basically now that we're having a retrograde Mars over it, it's going to bring this theme up again. I remember this eclipse. It was an interesting one. It was right when we were having also a Mercury Cazimi moment, where Mercury was in its home sign of Gemini, but it was retrograding back into conjunction with the sun. So there was like an eclipse, a solar eclipse in Gemini, which is already like, there's new information coming out, you know, it's just kind of flooding the airwaves or all kinds of stuff all over the news or the media. Gemini is very much about television, anything in regards to newspapers, print, social media, and Gemini. So we think of everything, all the craziness that was going on with Trump and, you know, the war on fake news, as I like to say. The whole Gemini eclipse sequence was really all about diversity in the media and starting to see two sides of an opinion. And where things were potentially being kind of manipulated because of the squares to Neptune. So this was a new moon, so it was a fresh start. In many ways, if you think back to what you were starting off doing, what you were just starting to kind of put together, what intentions or seeds you were planting, what you were talking about, it's hard not to imagine that everybody was doing something during this moon, because it was in an aspect to Saturn, so it was still in a trine to Saturn by about 6 degrees. And we also saw that Mercury was retrograding, conjuncting the sun during an eclipse. Now the moon rules the collective. So this is saying like everybody was talking about something, everybody was sharing something, everybody was, you know, talking about relationships, as much as I hate to say that, but it was at a 19, so it was like a lot of like relationship stuff. If we go back in time and we look at what was happening the year prior, we had a Venus retrograde in this part of the skies. And that was going on it was setting up basically in May of 2020. So Venus was going retrograde over this degree as well. So if you want to look at what was going on, especially right around the end of May of 2020, we had a new moon in Gemini. Venus was at this degree and Mercury was at this degree, and Venus was retrograding. So likely there's a storyline relating to going back and communicating with someone, or thinking about something that we loved, or traveling back to a place, or talking a lot about what news stations, you know, we're listening to. I mean, like, come on. May of 2020, everybody was glued to their TVs trying to figure out what the hell was going on in the world. And obviously it was a hot mess because it was all in direct squares to Neptune and Pisces. So there was a lot of chaos. We saw a lot of information coming out. Not a lot of it was factual, so we know now. in terms of like relationships also, I mean, I've seen a lot of like changes in relationships since these transits took place. Like we do see a do-si-do happen whenever there's retrogrades in Gemini. There's always two options, two paths, two choices, two people. And if you look back at what's been going on in your life, really since about the spring of 2020, you've realized that there's two sides of a coin, depending on which house that was in. Now, just going back to like this eclipse, I mean, it's kind of funny because I think about what was going on at this time during the eclipse in June of 2021. I had just gotten engaged, and my partner's Mars is at this degree, and it was really funny because it was like we were talking about like, what are we going to do? You know, like we were talking about just going off and getting married, and then we just decided to tell our family like, okay, if you guys want to come, you know, this is where we're going to be getting married. We got married in the Virgin Islands. So that eclipse very much was like, you know, putting all the invitations in the mail, and a lot of people being like, wait, what? What's going on? Like, you've moved to another state, now you're getting married. So it was very much like shock and surprise, literally through the post office, the mail that was being delivered. But yeah, I mean, this time around, it's going to be interesting because unlike Mercury, who can handle a retrograde very well in Gemini because it's going to go deep and get that information and it's very comfortable in that sign, even in spite of there being an eclipse and some very unexpected information, Mercury was supported because as he went retrograde, he came into a trine with Saturn and also pretty close contact with the North Node. So there was like lots of like fated conversations, information, stuff that was coming out, documents, paperwork, travel, which was supported by Saturn. This time around, I think that even though Mars is going to be in harmony with Saturn several times, my concern is the fact that as Mars retrogrades, Mars is going to be closer to the Earth. So we feel the effects of the Mars retrograde. So because Mercury rules communication, travel, anything in regards to like business transactions and being able to just kind of be on the same, you know, mindset with other people, Mars, when it retrogrades, there's arguments and fights and road rage, especially in Gemini, harsh words. It's kind of like a sweet and a salty aspect, to be honest with you. Like I'm really digging where it's at now because it's in such positive aspect to Saturn. So we want to think back to, okay, what conversations did we have back in, you know, 2021? What were we agreeing to? What documents did we sign? What were we learning? Where were we planning on moving? Gemini third house deals a lot with movement. And so I think that a lot of people have been like maybe thinking about moving or they've put that on hold. Some people have been thinking about going back to school, learning languages. It really depends. But all of this is this very third house, Gemini kind of mercurial realm. The reason why I say it's sweet and salty is it's sweet because it activates that eclipse and it's kind of giving us the third chapter of whatever we're working through. It's salty because it's going to start coming into a square with Neptune. So we're going to start seeing Mars come into this square with Neptune, which I think is going to be felt very strongly because we're also going to see the moon conjunct Neptune in Pisces, and this is going to be around the 7th of October. So, you know, where the Mars trine Saturn is open energy, sharing information, working together, getting motivated to work with teams, like getting, you know, phone calls from people that we want to hear from and being able to kind of collaborate with others and being very motivated to like share and learn. Mars comes out of the trine with Saturn and immediately starts coming into a square with Neptune and also the moon. So this is a day that I would watch for where there can definitely be a lot of like, what are we fighting for? What's really going on in the world, you know? And like be careful about what you want to post or what you want to share. Be careful about getting riled up because I think that there is going to be an agenda through this Mars cycle of trying to get certain people kind of hyped up or worried about like the next big thing that's going on in the world. And because Pisces deals with viruses, it deals with, you know, what's going on with the masses or globally. Also like things that can be like more secret or things that relate to stuff that takes place in private. I also think about like isolation, separation, and the moon coming into that conjunction can send people into like a state of panic or spiral. And like I've seen lots of anxiety with some of these mutable squares, with myself, but with a lot of clients as well. So, you know, Mercury at this point is direct, but it's still to some extent in an opposition to this. So on the 7th of October, we'll see the moon conjunct Neptune, which is very kind of like needing your emotional seclusion, wanting to be by yourself, taking a nap, in opposition to Mercury, not knowing how to emotionally relate, and then in a square to Mars. So it's like there's going to be, people are going to respond to this very differently. You're going to have some people who are going to retreat and they're going to want to kind of hide out. They're not going to want to say anything, and they're not going to know how to respond, or they're not going to want to pick up the phone or have the conversations. And then you're going to see other people who are not going to respond very well to those behaviors, and they're going to get passive aggressive, or they're going to freak out and get worried. And then you're going to see people who are going to want to react. So just be careful going into early October, knowing that we really need to be mindful of where we're putting our anger and our frustration. And if we are possibly like directing that at people or situations that really have nothing to do with why we're frustrated. Like, granted, it's going to be in the air. And there can be some confusion when we see Mars square Neptune as well. So there's a lot of like, I don't know why I'm in a bad mood, but I just woke up this way, or like somebody cut me off on my way to work. And like ever since then, I've been kind of off, you know? I also feel like telling people, like, pick your battles and be careful in regards to just wanting to get involved in just any campaign, any like next big thing that they're going to try to get people to get on the bandwagon for. Like, I'm not pro or against. First of all, I'm not for war, period. I think that's just my MO. But I think with this, there's going to be a lot of riling people up about something that's going on with potential war situations, or people who are being held in isolation, or people who are being put in jail, or people who are needing help. Like, I see a lot of issues with like immigration issues sometimes with conjunctions or squares to Neptune, or we've seen issues with people potentially being kind of iced out and isolated out of society, and just kind of cast aside. So we can see that there can be more stuff that's potentially coming up in regards to, you know, Russia, Ukraine, and just spinning things. And I would just say, be careful about what you want to jump in on, because not everything is going to be what it seems. Like I said, we are going to see that Mars will retrograde back, though. So as Mars retrogrades back, the second trine that we're going to see is going to be at the end of November. And that's when it's going to return back to this like 19, 18 degrees. So it's back there pretty much right around the 28th, maybe even a little bit earlier. Yeah, the 27th of November, really through December 3rd. Mars will be retrograde, see? So before it was Saturn. So the way that I see it is like there may be some things that you're setting up right now goal-wise that we might be a little overzealous, or we might be feeling like we can get everything done, or we can juggle more than one thing, especially with Mars and Gemini. We may find that as Mars goes retrograde and it reactivates this point, even with its trine to Saturn, it's like, actually, I'm not going to move to this state. I'm going to move to that state. Or actually, I'm not going to, you know, quit my job. I'm going to stay 6 months longer. Or I'm going to return back to school, but I'm going to do it online. Something like that is likely to come about, where we're going to realize that we may have bit off more than we can chew. So that's why I'm giving you guys this warning that while this trine right now is super amazing, it's going to give us all the foundation that we need to be really vocal and communicative about what we want to achieve, who we want to work with. We're calling on the right people. There may be a sense of whatever you're starting to put together right now that needs to be reworked in some capacity, especially closer to the beginning of December. Now, we will come into the final Mars trine Saturn, and that's going to be happening closer to February 25th, 2023. When it comes back to about 18 degrees, it will not be trining Saturn, but you will see that Mercury is going to be in a trine with Mars. So likely, like, whatever you're working out might even be taking until closer to February to like fully release or fully kind of figure out. So then Mars returns to that 18 degrees, really paying attention to the 27th of February, when the Moon and Mars and Gemini come together and they reactivate these degrees, and then Mars leaves the eclipse point, which is going to be around March 3rd. If you have any personal planets, like I said, around like 18 to 20 degrees of Gemini, pay attention, because likely there's going to be a starting something, going back, reworking something. And also a lot of the Mars retrograde is like reworking or redirecting our energy in some way. So Mars isn't just about fighting and anger. It can also be about our passion, our drive, our motivation. And I think for a lot of us, it's going to be like, how are we using our anger or our frustration? Are we just taking things out on other people? You know, are we getting angry and saying things we shouldn't be saying? Is there a need for us to really work through things and communicate where we're frustrated, rather than being passive aggressive with its square to Neptune, or kind of projecting that onto other situations and having conflict as a result of that, right? So hopefully that's helpful for you guys just on the Mars trine Saturn front. I mean, I feel like even this video right now is kind of like a result of that, and it just felt right. And I didn't even realize that it was because the moon was in a trine to Saturn and Mars. And of course, we're making a video that's all about Saturn and Mars. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about Venus as well. So Venus has been in Virgo for the last couple weeks. Obviously not totally thrilled in Virgo. I was not a fan of that Venus opposed Neptune. I don't know about you guys, but that was not a fun time for me. So I'm happy to see Venus get into Libra here in a couple days' time. However, I will say that Venus's trine to Pluto has been very cathartic and has really been willing to kind of get down and dirty and clear some stuff up that needed to clear out. And it's finally out of that opposition with Neptune. Now, it's important that we take a look at what's going on with Venus, because Venus is the ruler of the North Node, and that's kind of the direction where we're going, at least clear into next year, until the nodes change signs. So the difference between Venus in Taurus versus Venus in Libra is like, Venus in Taurus is my pleasure, my security, you know, what I have, what I'm eating, what feels good for me. It's very personal. And Venus in Libra is like, okay, that's great, but what about us and the harmony that we create and the romance that we create and the relationship aspect? So I'm excited to see Venus go into the sign. We are going to see Venus that's going to be in the sign of Libra from the 29th of September through October 23rd. And as I've said in previous videos, Venus is, she is invisible. So yes, Venus in Libra is great, but it's kind of like having that piece of chocolate and it just doesn't quite hit the same. I guess a lot of astrologers are kind of like, they have a lot of different opinions about this. I have just always observed that even when Venus is in Libra, when it's behind the sun, that means it's invisible. It's almost a lot of like something's going on magically behind the scenes, right? So it can be really great for like offerings to Venus, magic, ritual, bedtime pleasures, like sexual things. But there is a sense of something getting ready to emerge that we won't really start to see until the eclipse that happens at the end of October. And even then, when we have to really wait for Venus to get into Sag and pull a little bit ahead of the sun so we can really see the effects of Venus. By the time Venus gets ahead of the sun, it'll only be there for about 2 or 3 days. And then we have that like killer eclipse in Scorpio that's conjunct Venus, which is going to be, I keep joking, I'm like saying it's like the movie Carrie, you know, she's like standing there with like the blood all over and she's holding the knife. Perfect for Halloween time, but definitely Venus in Libra will kind of trade up the pretty bows and ribbons and all of the cream colors for like dark hair, red lipstick, and you know, like lots of whips and chains and like leather when she goes into Scorpio. And I think with an eclipse involving Venus also, you know, in basically her fall, it's going to be an interesting thing to see what's kind of going on there, because, you know, she'll be in a Mars ruled sign and the eclipse is really going to be highlighting that. So for now, yes, we do see more peace and harmony in relationships when Venus moves into this sign. Venus is going to make some really interesting aspects, okay? So she moves into Libra. She comes into an opposition with Jupiter that's kind of really setting up on the 30th of September and also the 1st of October, because as Jupiter is retrograding to about 2 degrees, Venus is moving to about 3 degrees. So it'll be happening between, you know, the end of the month and the 1st of October. Venus opposed Jupiter, overdoing it. you know, excessiveness, too much chocolate, too much love, too much romance. And it's such an interesting dynamic to see this kind of go down in cardinal signs, because I feel like Jupiter is very comfortable in Aries. It's very like, you know, adventurous, and it needs freedom and it needs independence, and it's just like very action oriented because it's in a fire sign. And then we've got Venus in Libra. So I'm wondering if this is still kind of this build up, right? Coming into the full moon in Aries, that's a lot of like, does absence make the heart grow fonder? That's something I've been thinking a lot about with the oppositions between Jupiter and also planets in Libra, where oppositions can separate people, but it can also create a little bit of friction or a little bit of time apart, which can actually have like a rubber band effect that like brings that person or that situation in so much more strongly. So as we see these planets come into oppositions with Jupiter, things seem larger than life. They seem bigger. Today, and I think even a little bit into tomorrow, we've seen the Sun in Libra in opposition to Jupiter, and it's definitely been a Sun opposed Jupiter day. I, you know, went out today and got to see one of my really good friends who I haven't seen, who lives in LA, who's getting ready to have her baby, and we went out and had like this like super fancy, you know, bougie lunch at the Venetian, and I was like, I don't ever really like eat like gelato in the middle of the day, you know, like I try not to eat a lot of sweets because I like sugar, and just going and being around like all these like really expensive stores and walking around like Hermes, and I'm like, I don't do this. And then come home and had like this like really over the top like birthday party for my French bulldog, because I was like, you know what, he's one, like let's do it, let's get him a cake and have some fun. And I sit down to look at the transits, and I was like, yes, it was a Sun opposed Jupiter day. Everything was just very big, you know? So I'm curious to see what happens when Venus comes into the opposition, because Venus being in this sign is going to be more about the sweetness, the spending, the relationships. And we can also see a little bit of friction there, because it's still kind of happening as we see the moon get ready to go into Capricorn. So watch out below around the 2nd of October as the moon really triggers this square between all of these cardinal planets. And I'm wondering if that's going to be kind of finally on the 2nd being like, we've been indulging a little bit too much. It's time to kind of cool it. But Venus is going to be in the sign really until I think like the 23rd of October. So pretty decent amount of time to have this transit. She's going to make some nice aspects. Not only is she following close with the Sun, but she is going to be making some trines to Saturn and also some harmonious trines to Mars. So we really like to see Venus in a trine to Saturn. That's when we're solidifying relationships. We're shaking hands on the business deal. We're finally putting the down payment on the house. Like these things kind of happen when we see Saturn's green light say, yes, you can do these things with Venus. So if we move ahead a little bit, outside of those oppositions, really she's in pretty smooth sailing. You know, watching her come into trines with Saturn and also the moon on the 4th of October, some nice air trines again. We're going to see her really be highlighted during the full moon that's going to be taking place. I've got a video coming out about that soon, but one thing I will say is that this is a full moon that's pretty damn close to Chiron, so it's going to bring up some wounds. So we had this new moon in Libra, right? And everybody's been talking about how we can find balance. How do we find our center? How do we figure out how to be a better, you know, partner to ourselves? What do we want? How do we make decisions? How do we bring in more beauty, more harmony? And we're in this 2-week working period until we get to this full moon on the 9th. That's going to be in Aries, which is already intense. Some of my favorite things in the world is like when I have like other astrologer friends or just other like friends of mine in general who are into astrology, whenever there's like a full moon in Aries, every year I'll get like 15 text messages that's like, oh my God, this is so intense. And I'm like, welcome to my life all of the time. Granted, I don't have Chiron anywhere near my moon yet. But you know, full moons in Aries are very Mars-esque, right? There's more need to assert yourself. There's more need for challenge, for conflict. And it's really highlighting that axis between Mars, the fighter, the warrior, and Libra, the lover, the peacemaker. And so while the Sun and Venus are pretty nicely placed in Libra, you know, coming into some loose trines with Mars, so it is very passionate, and also some trines with Saturn. people are going to be more communicative about this is what I need, right? And not just necessarily in relationships, maybe, but individuals, when the full moon is in Aries, are going to be more open and reacting to their wounds and more aware of where something is off for them personally or with their body, or there's frustration or there's anger. Thankfully, you know, the ruler, like I said, is still in some positive trine. So I'm going to keep telling everybody through the month of October, when in doubt, talk it out, communicate. And also we're going to see that the moon is going to be in a sextile to Saturn. So it's like, there are some situations I have realized through Saturn and Aquarius that I can't figure out myself. I just can't fucking do it. It's just not possible. Even though I would like to think it's possible, it's not possible. And Saturn in Aquarius has taught me that when I'm hitting a wall, I have to call someone else. I have to call a friend. I have to call a mentor. I need to join a group. I need to participate more with community. I need to share, right? I have Aquarius in the 5th. So I think that it's been both about giving back to the collective and being able to share my own opinions, but also knowing when to be humble and dropping the ego and really opening up and saying, like, I don't know how to do this, or this is scary, or I don't think I can do this by myself, or do you want to be my friend? These are things that Saturn and Aquarius teach us. And so I think that the medicine during this full moon is going to be learning when to reach out and ask for help and assistance if we're hitting a wall and we're not seeing the results that we want on our own, or even in relationships, like especially with the oppositions to Libra, because I feel like there can be a lot of opportunity and a lot of medicine in connecting with our friends or our networks when we are feeling like things are getting a little blah in some of our relationships, or that we're not getting the support that we need in our relationships, because relationships are not meant to be our sole purpose. Like it's the way that I've learned to look at it is that we have to become happy on our own terms. We have to be happy with ourselves and with our life. And relationships aren't for everyone, but it isn't until that we're in that place where we look at relationships and go, yeah, it would be great, but it would just be the icing on the cake. We have a lot of like trauma drama, right? And so Venus's conjunction to the sun really sweetens things, but I think with the opposition to the moon and Chiron, it makes us realize, like, you know, how am I feeling loved? Am I giving enough? Am I receiving enough? You know, am I feeling nurtured? The moon in Aries is not very nurturing. It is very aggressive and kind of like, you know, pick yourselves up by the bootstraps and figure it out yourself. So there can be some friction and some tension in relationships. And I would say not relying wholeheartedly on our romantic relationships and learning where we can kind of branch out to friendships and platonic relationships so we can get some really great feedback. And don't be afraid to take space from relationships during this moon to go and socialize and do things with other people, because I do think that absence will make the heart grow fonder. Now, as Venus continues to move forward, she's going to come into first a trine with Saturn. Oops, that's by the hour. Okay. She's going to come into a trine with Saturn at 18 degrees, and that's going to be right around October 13th. That's going to be a nice day on tap too, because we're going to have a grand air trine between the Sun, Venus, Saturn, and also the Moon and Mars in Gemini. Interesting to see that reactivated. That's come up a couple times just in this you know, video alone. Venus trine Saturn is the, like I said, the green light from Saturn to do Venus things. Commitments, engagements, marriage, proposals. I could also see this being about having just more quality time, Saturn is time, with friends, with our partners, feeling like things are coming together. I mean, I really like some of these transits. For people who are looking to like actually talk about getting married or launching businesses or things like that, like to see the Sun and also Venus in harmony with Saturn right around mid-month is quite wonderful. So great time for, you know, communication, meetings, and making agreements and contracts, and also finding peace and finding a way to be able to mediate as these planets in Libra all start coming into trines with both Saturn and Mars. Now, then we're going to see Venus come into a trine with Mars. That'll be right around here. on October 18th. So Mars and Venus, right, star-crossed lovers. When we see Mars and Venus trine, lots of passion, lots of romance, connectedness, togetherness. I'm really loving this day as well on the 18th. But I have to tell you guys, from about here on out, things start to get rocky. So, you know, all of the passion projects, the relationship stuff, the you know, positive things that you're wanting to get done, we want to really keep that to the first 3 weeks of October. Obviously, this isn't me saying that the rest of the month is not good, okay? Because I know some people can get sensitive about that if you're having birthdays or things. But we're going to start seeing that Mars is getting ready for its retrograde. We're going to see also now Pluto has woken up and Jupiter is going to make its ingress back into Pisces. We've got some major outer planetary things that are going to start happening. Okay, so then the sun comes into a square with Pluto the very next day. So I talked about how that can be some intense stuff in regards to like solar figures and like kind of power dynamics. And we're going to see that Venus is now moving out of the trine with Mars. So we're not seeing as much passion and kind of pleasure or focus on that. I have found that like when Mars, Venus are in positive aspect to each other, just like relationships are better, people are getting along better. We see kind of like a cease of the battle of the sexes, right? But as Venus and the sun come into conjunction at 26, they're going to square Pluto. So it's also going to be this realization through the closing square, because this is the last conjunction before these planets come into conjunction with Pluto. Think back to the Venus retrograde at the beginning of the year when Venus and Pluto and the sun were all conjunct. Pretty intense time, right? So this is the closing square. So it's interesting that Venus and the sun kiss, which is generally pretty positive, but it's going to be coming into a square with Pluto. So it's like, what needs to change and transform in terms of power dynamics in regards to find better harmony in relationships? We can find that through strengthening relationships and partnerships in the month of October. We can become aware of like what actually needs to kind of die off and like what we need to actually release, if that makes sense. Especially as these planets are rising and they're coming into, you know, these angles with Pluto. Besides that, you know, then we're getting ready to come into the eclipse. I'm going to do a video, I think, on just Venus following the sun for a couple days, because that's just going to be a whole video in itself. But then we come into the 24th and we're getting ready to have that eclipse that's going to be taking place in the sign of Scorpio, and it's going to be conjunct Venus. So Venus, the sun, and the moon will all be conjunct at 2 degrees. Pretty wild. And then a couple days later, we're going to see Mars is going to go retrograde, right? So I guess too long didn't listen. Venus is getting ready to go into Libra. It's going to be a much smoother transit. We're going to see that it's going to have an opposition to Jupiter. We might overindulge a little bit. But for the most part, the first half of October is really supported through trines to Saturn, where we're building towards a future, our future financial, relationship, romantic goals. Trines also from Venus to Mars, where we're going to see lots of passion and communication and opportunity for like short trips, love letters, writing to each other, reaching out, being passionate about what we're talking about, what we're sharing, what we're learning. And Mars is getting ready to not only come into this trine as you're watching this today with Saturn, but it is reactivating eclipses from June of 2021. So you want to think back to what was happening during that period, you know, what you were starting, what you were initiating, what you were writing down, what you were asking for, what you were talking about. And keep in mind that because there will be this retrograde taking place later this year, Mars is going to retrograde back to this degree to reactivate it again the end of November through December 3rd. Then it'll go direct and hit it again February 25th through March 3rd. So you want to take a look at where Mars is in your chart in Gemini. That is the action area of your life right now. Something is really active, and it's trining Saturn in Aquarius in your chart, which is basically helping stabilize and help Mars focus on the goal to better kind of solidify and bring together what Saturn wants, okay? So I am going to roll through these for the 12 signs really quick. Okay, so we're going to start with Aries and Aries rising, okay? As always, guys, also I'm a Western astrologer using whole sign techniques. I'm going to be talking to you about where the Mars-Saturn trine is taking place and where Venus going into Libra is taking place. I recommend listening to your rising sign, then you can listen to your sun sign and also your moon. If you're into Placidus, you may have to listen to 2 rising signs to kind of make sense and see what's going on, or you can consider booking a reading and find out exactly how these transits are playing out for you. Okay. So for Aries and Aries rising, how you guys doing? We have got Mars that's in Gemini. Okay, so Mars is in your 3rd house. It's putting a lot of focus and emphasis on communication, possibly running around, lots of short distance trips. Maybe you're writing, maybe you're reading more. Maybe you're just getting more active around your local neighborhood, right? Mars rules your chart. So Mars is in a trine to Saturn right now, and that's basically saying that through your day-to-day environment, through what you're kind of doing on your day-to-day, what you're thinking about, reading, who you're talking to is really funneling into your social life, your goals, what you're hoping to achieve. I have a feeling that some of you guys are just a lot more active with your friendships right now, or you're just communicating more with some of these people and talking to them about what you're hoping to achieve. Siblings, neighbors, extended family can also come into this 3rd house as well, okay? Keep in mind that the Mars retrograde is going to affect you and Scorpio rising pretty significantly. So if you're thinking about moving, right, or something like that, like just wait until Mars starts going retrograde. You'll see what I'm talking about, especially Aries risings. There are some things, some kinks that need to be worked out, either in terms of what you're learning, where you're taking classes, where you're living, or a vehicle. Also, Venus just moved into Libra, or it's going to be here on the 29th. So I have to say that it'll be there soon. And that's going into your 7th house. Pretty wonderful. It's going to bring the sweetness in regards to relationships. It's going to bring people who want to partner. You might just notice if you're in a relationship, more harmony. And there's a ton of other planets that are going through here pretty soon as well, right? We're going to have the Sun, Venus, and Mercury will be there. So lots of action going on in the month ahead in regards to your relationships, okay? Now, what you'll see is all these planets in the 7th house are going to harmonize with Mars. They're going to harmonize with Saturn. So I could see lots of like going to parties, traveling with friends, getting out of town, going on a road trip, just talking a lot more amongst your friends and your networks, and also like including partnerships. Those of you guys who are single, being social, you could meet someone, a friend could set you up with someone, a friend could be something more. Any of these things are possible, and just really keep a lookout for this reactivation that's going on in your 3rd house, because I'm wondering if some of you guys are realizing or talking about potentially moving again. Okay, good luck. Let's see. So now we have got Taurus and Taurus rising. What's going on, Taurus? Hope you're doing well. Thank you for joining me. So we have got Mars in Gemini in your 2nd house. It's moving ahead in regards to, well, maybe you're spending money. Maybe you are concerned about money, okay? Because Mars rules your 12th house. Mars also rules your 7th of relationships. There could be some anxiety on the money front, okay? You might be concerned about how a partner is spending money. You might be concerned that you're spending too much, because when Mars is in the 2nd house, it's kind of burning a hole in your pocket. Just be mindful, like this can be a time for saving as well. If you're managing how you're spending, it can also be a time where you're like really just kind of picking up momentum and you're starting to kind of feel more of your self-esteem kicking in. There can be also just your body kind of picking up on stuff, because Mars rules your 12th, and your dreams or your intuition can be in overdrive, and you might feel that physically kind of taking place in your body. Now, because Mars rules relationships, it's also going to be about you going back and forth with a partner about some of your earning potential, business partner, romantic partner, you name it. Over the next couple days, Mars is going to come into a trine with Saturn, which is really wonderful, because I feel like the bigger picture of life when it comes to your career is coming together, and you're getting ready to either maybe start traveling for work, or maybe you're putting a lot of time or energy into working on something, developing something, getting ready to sell something, getting ready to market something, publish something, which is actually going to be quite positive for you, but also quite positive for some of your partners as well. I think maybe there's like going to be a sense when Mars goes retrograde of like watching your spending, because you're spending more time or you're focusing more on another project. But in the long run, it's really going to benefit you and your partners. It's just important to be on the same page about spending habits. Good luck. We have got Gemini and Gemini rising. What's up, Gemini? So you know you have Mars in your sign. I'm sure you have felt it the last couple of weeks. Mars is going to continue to move through your sign. It's reactivating eclipses. So if you think back to 2021, there has been lots of changes possibly with your identity, with your body, with your drives, your motivation. But also I think it's been about your goals, right? So Mars being in your first house, you can feel busy, aggressive, active. Maybe you're feeling like you need to work out more than usual. Because Mars rules your friendships, maybe you're like focusing on traveling and like seeing friends or just kind of being around friends and communicating what it is that you want out of life, right? Mars also rules your 6th house of health. So keep in mind that these eclipses have been talking about how your body has been changing as a result of like making changes in your daily routine, fitness, what you're eating, stuff like that. Personally, I would say that with Mars in a trine to Saturn right now, I'm wondering if you're like really adamant about starting to collaborate and work with a group and start teaching something or sharing something. Maybe you're hoping to make plans and travel with some friends. I could see some of you guys going and like actually learning in a group setting, or maybe you're going to be teaching a group and you're really excited and you're really adamant and active about that. Now, we also are going to see through this next month with planets in Libra, lots of air trines are really harmonious for you, Gemini. I think having like the Sun and Venus go through your 5th house is really great for self-expression, creativity, love, romance. If you're self-employed, if you want to spend time with your children, if you want to have some romantic dates, if you're trying to get pregnant, all these planets moving through your 5th house is actually quite wonderful. You're going to see also that as Venus goes through your 5th house, it'll also start trining with Saturn, and it'll also start trining with Mars. So you're going to see something harmonized in regards to like joint resources. You're going to be feeling like really secure in regards to being able to afford travel or being able to afford something in regards to like education. I really think that you're going to love some of these air trines in your sister signs, and everybody will benefit from this, but I think of all of the signs, it's definitely gonna be probably Gemini and Libra the most. Okay. Stay active if you can. You know, a lot of this is about kind of finding ways to stay active and stay busy and express yourself and also have fun. Okay. And as Mars is setting up into its trine with Saturn, I'm wondering if this is just also like a lot of what you're learning about your body or what you're learning in terms of where you're living or where you're visiting. Good luck. We have now got Cancer and Cancer rising. What's going on, Cancer? Hope you're doing well. We've got Mars and Gemini. I'm sure you feel it. It's in your 12th house. Some of you guys are feeling like hiding out, right? Mars is going to be there for a while. I know it's an uncomfortable energy. The good news is that you can dance it out, boo-boo. Like seriously, dancing, drums, percussion. Some of you guys, unfortunately, are going to be feeling like I need to smoke or I need to, you know, like party or unwind, or you can have just like a higher libido with Mars being in the 12th. Not too bad. But because Mars rules your 10th house of career, we've got air trines happening in what's typically water houses. So there's a lot of communicating and having to express feelings, which can feel kind of uncomfortable. The good news is that Mars rules your career. It also rules self-employment, creativity, or lovers. It's coming into a trine with Saturn. So like if you're kind of feeling like anxious, there can be lots of support, especially like financial, that can be coming from friends, believe it or not. And I think with Mars in a trine to Saturn, it's also saying that you're really working out some of your career and relationship issues in the background, and you're sitting and you're thinking about it and you're like, how do these things affect each other? How does my work get affected by my relationships? Who's helping me and who's hindering me? And how have I gotten myself into some situations, and like needing to kind of reflect on some of that stuff, because this is happening in what is typically water houses. Now, the good news is that I think because the 12th house is where we go to rest, like you're putting to rest old like career issues that you might have with a parent. It's trining out through Saturn. So it's saying like there is like a need for you to like really reflect on this psychologically and become aware of like where endings really affect you and where sometimes holding on for too long can create more conflict. Now, throughout the next month, we're going to see planets go through your 4th house. We're going to see Venus there. We're going to see the Sun there. Venus changing signs and coming into your 4th house is really going to like beautify and make your home or your relationships with your home or your family more harmonious, right? I know Jupiter's up here and you're one of the first cardinal signs. So I know that having Venus here opposed Jupiter is making you realize that there is something funky or something off, either about your work life or your home life. It's going to feel a little intense at first, but it's going to fade. And I think as Venus goes through the 4th, visiting family, having women come and stay with you, female relatives coming to visit, you going to visit them, like relationships can grow a lot, especially if there has been like some falling outs. It's just a matter of like communicating and realizing, hey, I don't want to be on bad terms. I want to be able to communicate. I want to be able to talk. Or can you come over and, can we hash this out? I think you're going to see this more through mid-month. If it's not about family, it's definitely going to be about like kind of letting some old situation go to rest in regards to possibly even relationships. That's the other way that I could see it with Saturn being in your 8th house. A lot of you guys are recovering from like having ended relationships or feeling like you had to cut something out of your life, which is really difficult and possibly even affected your career. So just be gentle with yourselves for this transit. If you're looking for new homes or if you're wanting to improve your existing home, Venus going through this sign and trining everything, especially if that's your safe space right now, is at home, make it comfortable, make it your little, comfort den, whatever you have to do. Bring some more sweetness with Venus in there. You can bring, some candles in or some aromatherapy or some flowers or something that's going to kind of help you go through the process of just being able to heal yourself, okay? Good luck. We've got Leo and Leo rising. What's up, Leo? How's it going? We've got Mars in Gemini still in the 11th house, really activating your social life. It's really busy. Lots of talking to friends, possibly visiting them, seeing them, that kind of stuff. It's in a trine with Saturn in the 7th. So I could see, because Mars rules the bigger picture in your life, the 9th house, it's also travel and home. There is a sense of you like harmonizing and talking to friends about your relationships, and like maybe you're really stoked. Maybe you're like really like, hey, I'm excited to see where this relationship could be going. If you just met somebody, it could be really heating up and you could be introducing them to your friends. If it's a relationship you've been in, I could see this as being like you're talking more about your goals in terms of long-term stuff with a partner, and what the future holds. It is possible that if you are single and you have been undergoing some issues with Saturn in your 7th house, that as planets go through Libra and they start trining Saturn and also Mars, being social, going out, traveling, getting out of town briefly can be really wonderful for kind of like giving you a little bit of an uptick in your love life, okay? So, Saturn's getting ready to go direct pretty soon in this next month, and will then be moving forward and will finally leave your 7th house, and you won't be going through all of like the relationship stuff. Even if it's not with romantic relationships, there can be issues that you're having with clients or like even friends. A lot of this gets smoothed out, I think, as planets move into Libra. Venus moves into Libra. Venus is about peace, love, and harmony. She rules your 10th house of career, and she also rules your 3rd house of communication. Hello. So as she's going through the house that she's comfortable in, she might say, well, let's get out of town briefly. Let's invite a friend, and we can invite a significant other and we can all hang out together. Or she's going to say, let's hang out with a sibling and, call them and make plans, and maybe we can, go and find something fun to do with their partners. Communicate, especially Venus being in a 3rd house is going to be quite social, and there's like a lot of having to call and like make plans with people, but also it enhances your communication style. So if there's been some issues going on with a relationship, or if you've got friends that have been at odds with somebody that you've been dating, there's a way to kind of communicate and smooth all that out, and maybe kind of get back into the swing of having just healthier relationships with all of these people, okay? All right, so we have also got Virgo and Virgo rising. What's up, Virgo? You've got Mars in your 10th house. Pay attention. You are the 2nd of my mutable group. Mars is probably, I'm going to anticipate, with its squares to your planets and also some squares to Neptune, you're just a busy bee at work. Perhaps maybe there is a sense of you being like, am I taking a new job? Was something else offered to me? Am I going back to work somewhere? Am I changing what I'm doing for a living? I don't know. There's something like that that might happen as a result of the Mars retrograde. Just know that right now it's a part of a reactivation of what's been going on for like 2 years in your chart. So if you've been thinking about making a change, if you've been working 2 positions, if you have been told that there's going to be a shift or something going on at work, you might start to see that. Now, Mars trine Saturn, I think, is great. I know Saturn in your 6th house can be a bummer. There can be some health issues. There can also be some scheduling issues. But finally getting Mars in a trine with Saturn is really saying it's kind of helping you get on track and have a schedule. So you feel like you can do more of the things that you want. So like once you get stuff streamlined at work, you have more time to work out, you have more time to see your friends, like whatever it is that you want to do. Saturn in the 6th can delay your schedule, can create problems also health-wise, or limit your ability to like go to the gym or, you know, focus on your health. But now that Saturn's trining it, you've gotten things at work to a point where maybe you've renegotiated like the hours that you're working, maybe you're able to kind of scale back. So you feel like you can kind of restructure. Some of you guys are also taking time from work and you're planning on going back during the retrograde. Regardless, just know that there is not going to be a lack of work, and you have to be really careful with Mars in a square to your personal planets and also Neptune, because there can be a sense of not taking the best care of yourself and just working 24/7, and also like squaring Neptune in your 7th is like partners being like, where are you? Like, why are you not here? And you're going to have to kind of just take your time, realize that you're going to have to, you know, really allow yourself time to adjust, because you're going to see in Sag season, and you're also going to be seeing really all through the end of the year with the squares, that there's a lot changing in your relationships, your home, and as well as your work, okay? For now, Venus going into your 2nd house is really wonderful. It's going to be there until the end of October. The sun will be there. Mercury will be there. This to me is about like negotiation power. Like you have the ability to be like, you want me to do this and that? Like, are you going to pay me for it? And so you'll have the opportunity to really like negotiate your worth. So if you want to be asking for raises, or like just looking also to get new jobs. I mean, some of you guys can be finding that you can get some really solid salaries if you are thinking about changing jobs, but it is a matter of actually looking for it. Sun, Mercury, Venus all being in this 2nd house here pretty soon is really strong for business, and it's really strong earning potential as well, especially as it trines out Saturn and Mars. A lot of you guys are going to be getting reviews and finding out that you're, you know, making changes and you're getting new status and new titles at work and you're making more money. But still keep managing your health and be really proud of all the work that you've done. You know, like the 2nd house is also self-esteem. So there's something positive that's growing there as a result of a job well done. We have got Libra and Libra rising. What's going on, Libra? Let's start with Venus in your sign. That's important, especially for you in Taurus, okay, because it rules your chart. Venus on your ascendant is going to have you looking more beautiful, more attractive than usual. Great time for making changes to your clothes, hair, makeup, cosmetics, like whatever it is that you want to do. If you've been wanting to make a change, you can do that. I'm really interested to see what happens for Libra risings as Venus and other planets are coming into a trine with Saturn, as well as coming into a trine with Mars. Like I said, it's pretty good for the air signs this month with these trines. Where Venus goes, it's important because it is your chart ruler, but it also rules the North Node. So something that's interesting is that as Venus moves forward, she is going to start coming into both a trine with Saturn. So you are really loving and finding peace and harmony with your home base, and possibly even with children. If you own your own business and you work from home, it looks like it's going to be going really well received. People are going to be really supportive of like what projects you're putting together and what you're working on. More harmonious relationships also with family members and with kids if you have kids. We're also seeing Mars come back to this activation point. So you want to think about what's been happening here for the last 2 years in your life. Mars rules your 7th house of relationships. It also rules money. So one way that I look at this is that, first of all, the Mars retrograde is going to have you either traveling back somewhere, returning back to school, returning back to teaching. If you've been thinking about writing and publishing something, you might start working on that, and you're going to take your time. But Mars is in a trine to Saturn, so you've got your relationship ruler in your 9th house of the bigger picture in a trine to Saturn. So I'm wondering, are you thinking about the bigger picture and what it looks like in terms of your love life, 5th house, in terms of dating, in terms of vacations and free time? Are you and a partner talking about having children? Are you and a partner talking about possibly moving somewhere further away? Any of these things are possible. I think also because Mars rules the 2nd house, it's also about reworking something in regards to marketing and sales. So if you have a product, you own your own business, you sell something, maybe you're collaborating with a partner or you're talking to somebody about how you can market yourself more and actually bring more money in, especially as these eclipses come in through your 2nd house. Throughout the month, Venus and the Sun will continue to move through, and they'll trine Saturn, and they will also, they'll trine Saturn and Mars. Really wonderful for you, Libra. There's a need for you to communicate, talk about what you love, show your talent, show it to the world, and be really open possibly to getting into teaching or maybe even education, okay? Scorpio rising. How's it going, guys? We have got Venus that is in your 12th house, so she is now moving through the hidden sector of your chart for the next about a month. Venus rules your 7th house of relationships. Venus also rules your 12th house. Scorpio, be careful here because Venus going through your 12th house can be like a double-edged sword. The positive is it's great for like sex and intimacy. Like it can be really wonderful. There can be a lot of like togetherness with a partner, lots of growing in intimacy, especially as we're seeing Venus later in the month come into a trine with Mars. And there is a sense of just like feeling really deeply connected with another person and moving through issues with intimacy. On the flip side, I think of like, you know, these eclipses that are coming in at the end of this month, the next month in your sign. It can represent how the body is responding to fluctuations and changes psychically or in terms of relationships. Those of you guys who are partnered, having Venus go through the 12th house, you can have a partner that's going through some health stuff, or you can have a partner that's just a little distant, kind of weird, kind of quiet. There can be also a need to kind of release and let go of old relationship patterns and habits, especially when the eclipse comes, because it's going to deal with your body. Some of you guys might experience some turbulence in relationships. That's the truth, because as it goes through the 12th house, it's something that you don't see, and this is the house of undoing. So you or a partner can be displaying some bad habits, and there can be some friction. The positive is that your chart ruler, Mars, is in a trine with Saturn. So it's saying you're willing to change and transform your actions and your motivation and also your joint resources in order to better facilitate making changes and being able to kind of develop the home life that you want. Now, we know Mars will go retrograde here at the end of October, which is very important for you because that's your chart ruler. There can be a need to really uncover like wounds, intimacy issues, difficult conversations involving death, sex, taxes, all of that stuff. My advice is, Scorpio, the first 2 weeks of October, get it all out in the air. Because it's going to help you have a better understanding of where you stand with other people. If there are death and inheritance or tax or anything in relation to dealing with other people's money, you want to get that stuff rolling prior to the end of the month. You don't want to wait until the eclipses start because you're going to have an eclipse in your sign, which could affect your body. Some Scorpio risings are looking at having health issues relating to surgical stuff or relating to old wounds or something relating to the bowels or the reproductive organs. And then you're going to have an eclipse in your 7th house and it's going to square Saturn. As with all of the fixed signs, you're coming into a really wild time at the end of October through November. So my advice is, if you're afraid of something, talk about it. If there is a need to hash out something in regards to taxes or joint resources, get on it. If there is a need also for your partner to take a look at health-related things, have them do that as well. That seems to be really important. Know that the more that you're talking about intimacy and changes on the home front and also just in terms of intimacy, the more secure you're going to be going into this next, couple week period, okay? Venus will be in your sign also at the end of the month, and it'll be during an eclipse. So I could see a lot of that is changes with your physical appearance maybe, or something in regards to your body. And because Venus rules your partner, this is your partner coming to your aid and being there to help you through some kind of change or transformation, or just partners in general, right? Good luck. We've got Sag and Sag rising. What's going on, Sag? We have got Mars that is getting reactivated in your 7th house. And boy, oh boy, Sag, I bet you really know what I'm talking about when I talk about all the crazy relationship stuff that's happened over the last couple of years, right? People coming, people going, people coming back, hashing stuff out with people. You know, you've had eclipses and retrogrades that have been very strong through your 7th house. So over the next couple of days, you're going to see that this is reactivated, right? The 27th, 28th, 29th of September, it's hitting that same degree point of where we had an eclipse last year, and we've also had Venus retrogrades in summer of 2020. Now, Mars rules the hidden realm, hidden enemies, subconscious. So Mars going through your 7th house, it's like you're going to kind of see some stuff with partners that can be dicey. Not just partners, but it can be therapists, it can be clients, it could be just relationships with other people, showing their true colors. And the good news is that Mars is actually in positive aspect. So Mars is making trines to Saturn, okay? And Saturn rules money and resources. Mars also rules your 5th house. So if you're self-employed, if you have clients, I could see like a lot of like clients reaching out to you and being like, hey, can I connect with you? Can I get an appointment? You know, can I get in? I could also see this as like really motivating conversations that you're having with siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, just your close like family in general. Later in the month, we're going to see the Sun and Venus and Mercury all dance through your 11th house, and it's going to be super social, very active, all trining Mars. Makes me feel like those of you guys who are in relationships, there's lots of spending time with your partner, integrating them into your friendship circles, maybe traveling with them, right? Some really cool stuff is happening. The one thing that I want you to know is you already know from previous videos, Mars will go retrograde in your 7th at the end of October. So that is going to bring up the theme of like readdressing, you know, people from the past coming back. Mars is also your 5th house lord, so it's about true love. So I'm wondering, like, as Mars, which rules your 12th and your 5th, goes retrograde, does somebody suddenly come back to you? Do you suddenly get into contact with someone? Are you having dreams about someone? Do you need to kind of like close the door on someone? The good news is that all of the transits up until this point support you communicating and like saying what you have to say. Some of you guys might be going back and forth with 2 potential partners, or you're dating one and then somebody kind of pops into your life out of the blue. Regardless of what happens, just know that the planets are really supporting you being able to kind of have like good friends, good relationships, and clear out any fears or any worries or any bad habits or anything, and it'll come through relationships. So partners may trigger you a little bit, and they might make you realize that there's some stuff or some trauma you haven't fully dealt with, and they're trying to encourage you to talk it out, okay? I'm really digging Venus going through your 11th house. Great time with friends, great parties, get-togethers, and I really feel like it can be a really pivotal time for just really nurturing friendships in your life, or joining new groups or societies or networks or whatever, and really being able to communicate with other people, and yeah, really enhancing, I think, your partnership skills, okay? We've got Capricorn and Capricorn rising. How are you doing? Okay, so let's start with Venus going through Libra. So Venus rules Libra, okay? So it's your 10th house career lord. Venus also rules your 5th house of love and children and romance, creativity. For Venus to be going through your 10th house, lots of opportunity for praise, appreciation, looking good in the workplace, you know, being able to have more harmonious relationships with bosses and people at work, and lots of opportunities for sales and things like that. I also feel like with Venus going through this sign and coming into trines with Saturn in your 2nd house, it's like, you know, you're going to see that there's going to be lots of collaborations possibly happening in the month ahead, which is really kind of finally tuning some of your creative abilities, giving you the opportunity to really build on your self-esteem, possibly even bring in more money or drum something up. I think a lot of Cap risings are going to get a lot of attention for some of the stuff that they're putting out at work, and you may find that it's giving you the opportunity to possibly like get the attention of like other companies or like competitors, you know, like if you're working for a company and you're putting stuff out there publicly and you're looking for another job, you know, the Mars retrograde can very much bring you guys another job somewhere in the next couple of months. Granted, you might have to relocate, or it might be in another location, or maybe you would be working at part-time before you fully switch. Regardless, Venus, the Sun, Mercury, all getting ready to go through your 10th house is just a really pivotal time for you when it comes to your career, putting a lot of good stuff out there and looking good while you're doing it, getting the support of other people, building on your talent. As these planets all trine Saturn and also Mars, I also feel like it's about doing a lot of work, making more money, being able to make it possible for you to afford home changes. If you have to change apartments, if you're wanting to renovate, if you're like, okay, I got a job in another city, so I got to move back home in order to facilitate that. I've heard a lot of that. People going like, I got to take care of family, so I'm looking for a job closer to home. You may find it, basically, is what I'm getting at, okay? So I know that it's a little intense if you've got a Cap rising, because you've got planets going through your 10th, highlighting career, opposing Jupiter in your 4th, which is really highlighting your family. And watch out towards the end of October as all those planets start squaring Pluto. People want to work with you. They want to help you. And it's important for you to remain open to that and realize that new doors are opening, even if that means living in new places. We've got Aquarius and Aquarius rising. Hi there. Venus is in your 9th house in Libra, in a fellow sister air sign. Okay, so similar to Libra as well as Gemini, you're going to be experiencing some air trines this month. So it's going to be free flowing. It's going to feel super awesome. I know it has not been easy to be an Aquarius rising or an Aquarius sun this year. You've had a lot of change having Saturn in your sign, and it's really been putting the pressure on you to stand up and be more self-sufficient or take responsibility for something. It's going to be really cool over the next couple days to see Mars come into a trine with Saturn. It makes me feel like you're communicating, you're more positive, you're more optimistic about what the future holds. Maybe you're feeling more expressive. You've been working on some of your creative projects, if you're writing or if you're storytelling. This can also be like really great in terms of interaction that you're having with your love life, and you're feeling like your love life is moving forward because you've been more serious about what your goals are. Or maybe perhaps you've just been more authentic in, you know, how you're expressing your energy and not feeling like you need to hold back. Because Mars rules your 3rd house of communication and short distance travel, as well as the 10th house. I know that there is a lot of power in your words right now. I will just say that. I also get the impression that part of what's going on with some of the trines that will be taking place in your 9th house is some of you guys are thinking about publishing, is like the feeling that I'm getting. Venus, the Sun, Mercury going into your 9th, you know, if you're a creative writer or if you're putting something together, maybe you're putting together a course or a class, you're getting ready to take one. The other way I could look at this is like some of your kids might be going to school or they're taking new lessons or courses. Maybe with Mars being in your 5th house, you're really hyped up and you're like, I am traveling, I'm going on a vacation, or I'm planning one. I could see that happening as well. Really great air trines for the first half of October. And I think as Venus goes further into your 9th and it starts coming into a trine with Saturn, it's really saying like there's more peace and harmony on the home front. Maybe you need to go out of town for a little bit, or you need to go away, go on a retreat, go on a vacation to realize how much you appreciate home, right? Or family in general. All these planets going into the 9th house are really positive also for law and legality. So if you're in a situation where you're trying to sign documents, get some court stuff going, or feeling like something is kind of coming together in that sense, very positive for you as well. So you know that Mars will go retrograde at the end of October in your 5th house. This is about taking chances, gambling, right? So you're going to be a little bit more cautious with maybe your online trading. Maybe you have some feisty kids in your life, something like that. In the midst of that, it's still going to be trining Saturn, so it's important to kind of maintain that serious, kind of stern, detached, this is the way that it is, with lovers, with romantic partners. Like there is a sense of like not backing down. That seems to be really important for you, okay? And last but not least, we have our Pisces. What's up, Pisces? How's it going? So the next couple days, you're going to see Mars in harmonious aspect with Saturn. So this says it's the 30th. Here, I'll bring it back so it makes sense for you. There we go. So for the next couple days, we're going to see Mars and Gemini in a harmonious aspect with Saturn. Okay, so Mars is in your 4th house. It can be about visiting home, being home, something in regards to the homeland. Maybe you're getting ready to move. Maybe people are visiting you. Maybe you're thinking about buying a place, right? So Mars in the 4th has a lot of action in regards to the home base. And Mars traditionally rules your 2nd house of resources as well as your 9th house of travel. So if you're not traveling back home or visiting family or they're visiting you, you're possibly thinking about buying in another area or you're thinking about visiting. Mars is going to be in a trine with Saturn, okay? So Saturn rules friends and goals and also has a connection to your 12th house. I'm wondering, is there a sense of like going back home, reconnecting in some way, maybe even being with like partners? That's the other way I can see this as planets are moving through Libra. Now you're going to have air planets in what is traditionally water houses. In a couple days' time, Venus will go into your 8th house. And this is telling me that there's like a transformation going on with like partnerships and relationships and also like resources. And then it's going to be trining Saturn. So there's like lots of emotions that need to be talked about and kind of worked through with other people. Mars is reactivating the eclipse point that we had in 2021. So if there's been a storyline about being like, I'm going to move somewhere or I'm going to be in a new place or I'm, thinking about going to a new city or changing houses, that's going to now get reactivated because Mars is going over that degree. Because Mars is in a trine with Saturn, it's also saying that it's like about your vision or like what you were thinking about or manifesting or kind of meditating on. And over the next couple of weeks, as planets go into Libra, it's going to trine Saturn and also Mars in the 4th. So if you've been wanting to see finally some headway on the home front, finally making the move, finally getting the home loan, finally getting the time or the opportunity for things to kind of shift, I definitely think that you're going to see that. And as Venus goes through Libra for the next couple of weeks, it's going to be in your 8th house, which is quite sexy, if I may say so myself. Also great for bringing in bonuses and unexpected income, especially as it's trining Saturn and Mars. You may see support coming in the form of like getting refunds, like things get worked out tax-wise, like partners are more generous, maybe you get a bonus. Maybe your family's more generous with Venus in your 8th house and a trine to Mars and they want to help you with like traveling to visit or maybe anything in regards to finding stability in regards to a home, okay? That was a longer video that I was anticipating on doing, but that's okay. No worries. Hopefully it was helpful for you guys, especially just big news seeing Venus change signs. I think it's going to be really wonderful to see her back in a sign where she's going to be a little bit more comfortable. So once again, stay tuned for that. That's going to be happening on the 29th. If you want to let me know how you're feeling with this energy or let me know what's happened with these Mars transits, because especially people who have natal placements in Gemini, like that 17 to 20 degrees, what has happened during the Mercury retrogrades, the eclipses, the Venus retrograde? What do you see that's coming back? Because likely it's doubles or 2 situations or something that keeps repeating itself. I'd be curious to see some of those like double trouble stories that you guys have for me. That's all that I have for this week. I'm going to try to get horoscopes out later in the week for you guys for the month of October. I cannot believe that. Otherwise, I will see you later at the end of this week. Don't forget, on Saturday, we're going to be doing live readings on the channel at 7 o'clock p.m. Pacific time, 10 p.m. Eastern. Also, I still have space for my October 9th webinar. So I haven't really said anything about this yet, but I'm doing a webinar that's going to be all about the eclipses in the fall. So because we're coming into eclipse season, they are wild, y'all. I'm going to be doing a webinar specifically on the solar eclipse in Scorpio at the end of October and the lunar eclipse in Taurus. That'll be in November. Talking about how it's going to affect the 12 signs, some astrological remedies, some relief, and what I'm predicting for the world. And I'm going to be talking a lot about the archetypes of Mars and Venus, as well as Uranus. And I'm going to be incorporating like herbal stuff and talking to you guys how to work with that during the eclipse periods to kind of better manage those energies. So if you would like to learn with me, take one of my webinars or take one of my courses, book a reading, check out the links below. You can book with me at beyondtheveiltarot.com. Thank you guys so much for listening. I appreciate it. Enjoy your Mars trine Saturn. Really strategize, come up with a plan. Remember, what are you fighting for? And it's going to take a little bit of time to kind of work out the kinks, but it's going to be interesting to see what this transit produces come the turn of the new year. All right, that's all for me. Take care.